Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
Well, Chemical County voters may be in for a stormy election season with a potential referendum on whether to eliminate the county executive position. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. County Council last week took up a measure that would put elimination of the position to the voters. Issues ranging from efficiency to cost were raised during last week's session. The council has a public hearing set for June 4th with a possible final vote on June 18th. And this afternoon we have Chemical County Executive Julie Giordano in our studio. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first of all, before we get into all the sound and fury here, after being in your position now for a while, how do you see this position as it functions now in county government, given your own experience with it?
So how I see this position is you are more than just a leader of Wicomico County. You are a leader for the Lower Eastern Shore. And I think the position itself is super important. There are only 9 county executives across the entire state. And there are only 2 on the Eastern Shore, if you count Cecil County. And so it's a really important role. I mean, not only do we represent, again, Wicomico County, we represent Worcester and Somerset and Dorchester. And when we go to Annapolis, those are the things that we kind of fight for, are the values of the Eastern Shore. I mean, is our focus Wicomico? Of course, but we kind of come full force, as a regional approach with a lot of different things. But the position in itself, I mean, you are running the daily operations of the county. You are making decisions every single day that affect people here. And, you have a good group of people around you besides your department heads. You have your, internal office. And, we just try to work hard every single day and make Wicomico a better place to live.
In terms, by the way, of getting things done, having a central place for somebody to go, as opposed to, say, for instance, the way it was before the position was created, where you went to individual council members and then the council had made the decision. Mm-hmm. How efficient do you see that? I mean, in terms of that contrast between the two, and I don't know whether they have much history or sense of history about how it was in the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's great, and I think a lot of people, they call our office for all sorts of things, and having that point person that works Monday through Friday. I work 80 hours a week, in this position, and so having that point person, I think, is super important because we're able to get you at least to the department that you want or that you need to be in, or, whatever that case may be. But again, there are important decisions that have to be made daily. And so we're making those as we go along. But I think it is important for the citizens. And what's even more important is that the citizens have somebody that answers to them. I think having an elected official in that role is super important as opposed to an unelected bureaucrat running the county.
In terms of, I'm sure that the county council members would say, well, they represent their individual districts, mm-hmm. and they can respond effectively to whatever the needs are because they're closer than, say, the county executive.
I would actually have to disagree because while they do represent a specific area, of course you have 2 at-large councilmen that, sort of, look at the whole thing, but they only meet 2 days a month. So any issues or potential things where they can actually collaborate as a holistic body is only 2 times a month. Even the city of Salisbury, I look at theirs and they at least meet weekly where they have, a legislative meeting and then a work session meeting. We don't do that. We kind of put everything together. So 2 times a month, which I think is really difficult because there are times where we are waiting and waiting and waiting. And I know people say, well, it's only 10 working days. You have no idea how long that is when people are waiting for specific answers. That's a really long time. So I think while I do think that that they are important and they have those reach outs to those specific people, I also think it is important to have somebody there 5 days a week that can handle those situations right away.
So I want to turn to the council president, John Cannon. He said that he sees the change to a county-run government as being, quote, more inclusive and collaborative governance structure. And he goes on, before you answer this, that he thinks this is not really a personal issue. And here's what he had to say.
Okay.
So it's not only individual, it's the form of government that we need to be concerned about. And this is really based on public input that I've received and that council members have received with concerns as to whether or not this is the most efficient form of government.
So what do you make of that? Is it personal? Or is it structural?
I think, of course, me sitting in this role, I 1,000% think it's personal. It's definitely personal. When you look at his history, there have been 4 county executives. We had Rick Pollitt, Bob Culver, John Pasota, and myself. And all 4 of us are very different in personality. I think if I had to choose one, I'm probably a little bit more like Bob than any of the others. But we all are very different. And I'm the first woman elected. And at the end of the day, having 4 different personalities, but having a council that is continuously battling the executive position and making legislation or passing things to try to eliminate and chipping away at the power of the executive for that balance of government. First of all, how can it not be personal? But secondly, more importantly, there's 2 common denominators. I mean, math is math. And if you look at the council and then you look at the executives, the common denominators are on the council. And I think ever since this has turned into an executive form of government, there's been some animosity with some of the council with it. And I think a lot of it is a balance of power. And the thing is that in a councilmanic form of government, you don't have that balance of power. You don't have checks and balances. And I think that there are a lot of people that see that. And I understand that he's had people reach out, and that's fine, but so have I. And if you look at online polling, if you look at different things, the people are not happy with that decision. So whether it goes to ballot or not, and I think their decisions have been made, I think that even if 1,000 people came out and spoke out against it, I think they have the 5 votes to put it on the ballot, but I don't think it'll pass. I really don't. I think people are happy with the way that the government is set up now.
The other issue that came up, obviously, is the issue of cost in terms of your office. This is something that Joe Holloway highlighted in his remarks.
Yeah.
In 2023, the county executive's office budget was $544,000. 2024, the county executive's budget was $706,570. The proposed budget for this year, and I hope this council's got the guts to take care of it, is $837,447. That's huge. It's a big jump in just a few short years when you really don't see any results.
What's your response?
Well, first and foremost, I find it kind of comical that they're referencing the 22% increase when we added a position to our budget this year. They cut that position, which is fine. Succession planning, I guess, is something that the council does not find to be important. I have 2 elderly women in my office. They're fantastic, but they're, not going to be around forever. And so, we were kind of looking at some succession planning. But what Councilman Holloway doesn't say is that the council has raised their budget 36%. So raising it $250,000. So their budget is almost at $1 million, and they have added no positions. So everybody's budget has gone up. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, inflation is up. The cost of doing business is just up across the board. But I feel very comfortable in my numbers. And if you look at those numbers I don't know where he was pulling the number of 23, but when John Pasota was in office at the end of 22, kind of halfway through 22, he didn't have a full staff either. So it proposed at 523. There was no director of administration. There was no deputy director. He was the acting county executive. So the budget is going to be lower. Now that we're fully staffed, having a director and a deputy director, it's obviously going to be higher. The only thing we added in my budget was the 5% raises that went across the board to everyone and the additional position, which the council ended up cutting. And so our budget is back down to where it was.
Well, let me ask you this. In terms of the costs, what's the breakdown in terms of what we pay simply for administrative offices as opposed to the county executive office itself? I mean, is there a breakdown there? I mean, and obviously then you have the budget that takes care of the zoning and all the rest of that. I mean, you've got that as well. I mean, how does that break down, and how much does your office and your administration anyway add to that budget? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So I think the number that he was referencing was just the executive office in general. So you have the elected official, which is my salary.
Right.
You have a director of administration, a deputy director of administration, and 2 office associates. That's it. And we have some other added costs. We have like a contingency account, and we have a couple of other things, community outreach and, some professional services if there's something, some sort of contractor or something else that we bring in. But for the most part, we have a very slender budget. So out of all of the departments, and like I said, I just find it kind of comical that he neglects to mention the 36% increase that the council has, because there are no checks and balances with the council budget. So any group comes in front of that council, they can cut, but the council budget cannot be touched. It can't be questioned or touched by anybody, which is frustrating.
So one of the things I wanted to kind of look back on, I talked to a few people about this, is that there was a stormy relationship between Bob Culver and the council. I mean, from the get-go, I can remember it. And over personnel issues as well. I mean, there was some real back and forth. And it seems to me that, in part, there is an institutional history to this conflict, that you may be the last person, to get off the station, as it were, but there it is. It's like they have not liked this for a long time. Do you get a sense that this is institutional in nature beyond just simply the back and forth that you're seeing?
I think so. They have a folder back in my office of all the letters that were sent on Friday afternoons from council president going to the county executive, or back and forth. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely, and I think the problem is that, from an outsider's point of view, when I was running, I even said, I teach 17-year-olds, you talk about conflict, in high school, you think about all that drama. I said, I can handle 7 adults. I mean, we're all adults here. We can have this conversation. But what is so frustrating is that my office, and they may have a different scenario. You put one of them in the seat, they probably have a different thought. But we have tried several different techniques and tactics to try to work together. I had open office hours where I would say, hey, I'm available from 3 to 5 this day. Come on in and talk about different things. A couple council people took advantage of it, but most of them did not. Bringing them in on certain issues. We're having a big issue with this fire service agreement with the city of Salisbury. That back and forth. They were in my office and agreed to the $2 million in a 1-year deal, and then to go over in council chambers and then completely flip. So we have tried different techniques to try to work together, and unfortunately, it just seems to be, it ends up becoming combative, and I really don't know why. There was a point in time around January of this year. We worked on getting the Verizon building for the health department. We worked on the building for the CAC. We worked on the liquor legislation, which was huge. And we all worked together, and, we're moving, we're communicating, we're doing these things. And the answer to that was, I was waiting on the proclamations, which the council does, to sign them for the month of March, and they never came. And one of my secretaries calls over and says, hey, where are these proclamations? And they said, oh, no, we're not putting the county executive on those anymore. For no reason at all. And it's little petty things like that where it's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? So now it's, well, she can do her own proclamations, which is fine. I go out and do mine, and that's totally fine. But it's little petty things like that where it's like, we have all these things that we're getting along and doing, and it's almost like they couldn't stand the lack of conflict or something, and then they throw something like that out there. So, and we knew that the budget going forward was going to be a little contentious, as we move throughout the year, and that's what we're working on now. But we have tried several different tactics. I am a very assertive person. People call, some people say I'm abrasive, and that's fine. But Bunky, my director of administration, is very even-keeled. Matt Leitzel, very even-keeled. I've even said, if you would rather talk to them, they're a little bit less combative than I can be, and I understand that. But even then, he's been thrown under the bus a couple of times. And like I said, they probably would have a different perspective. But I do feel like there are some things on both sides that could definitely be improved, but never did I think that they would take the voice away from the voters and try to, and what they're hoping for, and I'm just going to say this, as well as I do, there are uninformed voters in this county that will go in, they'll do their civic duty, but they don't read it. And that's what they're hoping for, is that people will just come in and vote yes to whatever those ballot questions are and go through that way. And I think that is so wrong.
One of the other things, by the way, it was Shani Shields who brought this up, council member. She was also, matter of fact, a member of the city council years ago. She says, well, you're not there during the sessions. And she said, we used to talk or whatever it is, and now you're not there anymore, right next to you, because she sits on the end. What about that?
Yeah, so I started, it was actually funny. It was brought to me by the Greater Salisbury Committee, Mike Dunn, and he said, the city of Salisbury has the mayor and the director or their city administrator sitting in. And I said, I think that's a great idea. I would love to sit in there. And what started to happen is that, as things, not necessarily become contentious, but if there are citizens that have questions or things like that, I don't get executive comments at the end. I don't get to make those comments at the end or kind of wrap things up, unfortunately. And as things kind of went on, I really started to understand that this is not the executive meeting, and it's not the executive and council meeting. It is the county council meeting. This is an opportunity for people to come forward to their council representatives and say, hey, this is a policy we want changed, or this is a concern we have, or this is, an issue that we're having. It's really not my meeting. And I decided, and I think it was agreed upon by both parties, I would just remove myself, but I would still be there, within the meetings. These last couple meetings, there hasn't been a seat in the House. So with me removing myself from the front, I kind of watch it from my office. I'm watching everything that's going on. And when I need to go in, I do go in. But these last couple meetings, I'm going to be honest with you, I can't sit in what I would call like a Jerry Springer episode. It's like the bad mouthing and the nastiness from the podium. And to me, if you're going to set those guidelines and say, this is what our expectations are out of our citizens, there is a level of civility that needs to happen at this podium. You're on PAC 14, you're standing in front, you're hearing what citizens, people are listening into that. But to sit there and allow the bad mouthing of one entity of government because you don't agree with them, I just feel is so wrong. I wouldn't like it if it's me, obviously. I wouldn't like it if it's my department heads. I wouldn't even really like it for them. Nobody wants to sit there and hear that. And I understand freedom of speech, and I believe in that. But I also think that there's a level of civility that you can do that. And I do not find it productive when people are just coming in and saying the same nasty things over and over and over again when we are trying very hard to try to fix a lot of these problems and concerns. But like I said, if I had executive comments at the end and I was able to make comments besides standing at a podium, I probably would be a part of their meeting if they would allow it. So
I want to turn to personnel conflicts. And you're not the first, as I mentioned a moment ago, Bob Culver, he ran into it. We had obviously Dan Cox, who you wanted on, and that was rejected. Turning to Cox for just a moment, one of my observations about Cox was that no matter what his qualifications were, no matter how good he was, there was this toxicity about the campaign that he ran and people reacting. So that even if he were doing this great job, other comments could very well reflect on the county itself. I mean, it just seemed to me that was a choice that was, I don't know whether it's going to fail, but it certainly was going to bring so much controversy. What about that choice?
So Dan Cox, I know him personally. Yeah. And like I said, if you set the campaign aside, I was looking at the fact that Dan Cox is a constitutional attorney, and I wanted him for special counsel. This wasn't a county attorney. He wasn't taking over for Paul Wilbur. He was going to be working on 5 to 10% of things going on in the county. I trusted Dan. I thought Dan was a good choice for me. Now the council disagreed, and you know what? They had that right, and we moved on. It was kind of, a hot topic up, in the news for a little bit, but once it happened, the way that they did it, they voted on it and they voted him down and we moved on. So, and that's okay. I mean, they kind of felt the same way that you did. I think Dan would have done a great job. I think that he is still a good attorney, but like I said, I understand the controversy. So, I mean, it's fine that they voted that way.
Because these appointments, particularly in your position, when you make appointments, there is a political edge to them. No matter what, no matter who it is. I mean, it's just, and that's what really struck me about Cox is that obviously coming a bit from the outside, but that just didn't. I mean, do you think that was a misstep?
I don't know if I consider it a misstep. I think that I think that for what I wanted him to do, I think is fine. So I think I still stand by my choice, but it's okay. I mean, we were able to move forward, and we ended up, we have special counsel now. We have a CBA, Cheryl Brown. She's fantastic, and she works very closely with the former Lieutenant Governor, Boyd Rutherford. So, we ended up with a really great choice. So I'm okay with that choice,
Just briefly, did you see this coming in terms of the controversy? When you made this decision that
with
you
Dan?
wanted, with Dan,
I think what's crazy is that I think this was a learning curve for me because we had a 5-2 Republican council, 5 Republican councilmen who claimed that they're super conservative and this, that, and the other. So in my mind, I'm like, at first I said, oh, this will be easy. This is 5-2 Republican council. But as I saw, a lot of citizens kind of doing their kind of outreach saying like, hey, we don't really know if we agree with this. And it was a lot of people from the Democratic side, and that's understandable. And they have to be councilmen for all people, not just their political party. So I kind of understood that controversy. Like I said, I still kind of stand by my thought that he's a good attorney, and I was able to set that political piece aside. And if they couldn't do that, then that's okay. And like I said, we moved on and we ended up with another great attorney. So
the other thing is you had, and I don't have the names in front of me, but you've had, I guess, another personnel battle. You went to court, as it were. And again, and I'm sure you heard Greg Bassett and I chat about this, and whether or not this was the hill to die on, I guess, I think was a phrase his was. And it just seemed, again, it was like we got stumbled into this personnel fight rather than necessarily moving on with the business of governing, at least from the outside. That's the way it's said. Why did you pursue this, and was it worth it? I mean,
so a couple of things.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So his name is Matt Leitzel. And Matt was exactly what we were looking for in this position. And I was really getting frustrated because, there are certain things that I think that the council needs to have, that final stamp of approval. And when it comes to the executive team, and I think this is where Bob Culver kind of had his frustration as well, where you've got to let us have our team. If we fail, then it's on us. Then you have something, But if you're constantly battling this, and the reason that they didn't want to approve Matt is because of his 23 years of law enforcement experience, which was kind of ridiculous in my mind, considering the fact we now have a police accountability board. We have these different entities in the county where we're having trouble getting police officers. We're having trouble getting 911 dispatchers. We're having trouble with corrections. So why not have somebody in our office that at least has a little bit of that institutional knowledge? But be that as it may, Don, I'll be honest with you, the council was wrong. They were wrong. They did this behind closed doors. We submitted. All they had to do was vote, and they didn't vote. And our charter very clearly states that they have 45 days to vote. If not, the appointment stands. And county attorney agreed with us. The judge agreed with us. Now, was it the hill to die on? Listen, at the end of the day, if we don't follow our charter, what do we have? You know what I mean? Is it okay to violate laws just a little bit? Is it okay to violate the Constitution of our county, the Constitution of the United States, or the Constitution of our state? I don't think so. And at the end of the day, Matt was worth fighting for in my aspect, from my perspective. And the council was wrong. The county attorney said they were wrong. The judge has ruled twice. Now they have appealed to the state of Maryland, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But, and we'll see how that goes, But at the end of the day, I will always fight for what is right, always, and especially if it's a violation of our charter. And if people have a problem with that, then they'll just have to have a problem with it, because we have that charter in place for a reason, and these are the guidelines that we follow. So
one of the things that's pointed out to me is that I believe a number of the council members are sort of on their way out. That is, that they're not going to go ahead and seek re-election. 3 of them, I guess, Holloway, Canada, and Hastings, I think. Mm-hmm. So that seems, all of this, like an odd thing to do when you're halfway out the door.
That's kind of how I felt. And actually, it's kind of interesting because Councilman Shane Baker has publicly stated that he was not running again. But I hear we're not friends on Facebook, but I hear on Facebook he kind of stated that maybe he will run again. When you have, especially, you're not even just the councilmen that have the experience. When you are saying we're going to change the entire fabric of government and then leave a brand new council to run this county, I mean, I don't know how responsible that is as elected officials. I mean, I just don't know if this is the time to do it, especially if they're on their way out the door. I really don't. How are you going to leave a brand new council to hire a council administrator to run this entire county? And you're going to have 4 brand new people, 3 or 4 brand new people.
So, by the way, in terms of efficiency, one of the things I think I was talking to somebody about, they said, under Bob Culver, for example, there was this great controversy about the Civic Center and selling beer, right? And Culver said, no, I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to challenge this. We're going to do this. The council obviously had not acted on this, and he got it done. Along the same veins, we had the liquor dispensary, right, which had been lingering for many years. You took up the battle, and you got the legislature to do it. What about that there are these achievements? Because you can hear, matter of fact, in that soundbite that I played by Joe Holloway, you can hear him say, well, and we didn't get much for it. And not just you, but in general.
I think that's really frustrating because, I, being in this role now, I really see, I only met Bob a couple of times before he passed away. I saw like he was so innovative and he really wanted to do great things and he had such good ideas for the county. And didn't get to really put a lot of those, forward. But it is a big task, for him to have accomplished the liquor at the Civic Center, huge, not just with us with the liquor bill, but also the sanitary district. This is something that, we've had water and sewer issues here for years and years and years, and it's just been kicked down, it's just been kicked down the road. And so we're, working on that as well. And to sit there and say that we haven't got much out of it, it is kind of hurtful. And, I work, as I told you, 80 hours a week. 80 hours a week. My family's affected. My son is affected, and that's really frustrating because to sit there and say, well, you're not needed because you haven't done anything. That's really frustrating. We worked so hard on that sanitary bill. We worked so hard on that liquor bill. And that was back and forth. John Cannon went on vacation and there was a little bit of, confusion as to what was going on and what we were going to continue to do. We were in Annapolis testifying. We were in Annapolis for the bill signing. And I think our restaurant owners would probably not agree with Mr. Holloway on that one. And this is huge for our county. There are a lot of people that like the dispensary system. They don't want a liquor store in every corner. I get that. But now we have this hybrid system, which is great. So to hear that you haven't done much is really disheartening.
By the way, one of the things that jumped out at me with John Cannon's remarks was that he spent 4 hours on the phone talking to somebody for a long period of time. And he seemed to indicate that all of this was just simply not efficient. Does he spend a lot of time on the phone? I mean, I don't know.
I have no idea. I don't know how much time he spends on the phone. I don't know, to sit there and say this isn't efficient, but look at what we've accomplished. I mean, look at the things that we have put forward. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. There are things, again, that we work on every single day for people. I had a constituent reach out to me who did not vote for me, who was very vocal against me and said, we need help with a stop sign. And as minuscule as that is, within 2 weeks, we had a stop sign where she needed it because there were several accidents. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. We support, all people, and we're going to, put forward or, try to help those constituent issues. But again, to sit there and say that this is not efficient. No, what's not efficient is having to wait 2 weeks to get answers on things. For example, we had the ferry go down. We've had this happen. The ferries are very difficult to keep up with maintenance wise. And right away I have to sign the order right away, to get it done. So I don't know how efficient a councilmanic form of government is. I really don't, and there were a lot of people that were upset with that council. I mean, you talk about raising taxes, they raised taxes, I think 21% in 1 year. I mean, there are things that the council has done that I don't think people are really happy with. So I've heard, for as many people as he has probably heard saying, get rid of the executive, I've heard the same thing, get rid of the council. We'd be better without them. And I'm like, no, we need the balance of government. No, we need the balance of government. But I think that there's a role for both of us. And in Wacomico County, I think it's needed.
The other, by the way, recent event, the Safari at the Quarry, right? So the council said this was not a good idea. We had the mayor, actually, of City of Salisbury said, no, we don't think it's a good idea. And they pointed to, I believe it was a petition by some of the local folks, 1,300 or something like that. There's a large number of signatures on that petition, which in one sense, I get the sense that they were reacting to. That if you can see potential with a lot of names of people in the area, you're going to react and say, well, maybe we should slow down on this. Obviously, it was successful, but could the council be blamed for, or at least trying to be cautious, if not saying, hey, maybe we need to rethink this? I mean, what's your sense about that?
Sure.
Because there was that pushback. It
yeah,
wasn't just,
absolutely. So Safari at the Quarry, we came forward with this idea in August of last year. And then by December, we had Brad Hoffman in front of the council explaining what this event was going to be. And if you listen back to those sound bites, they say, oh, this sounds like a good idea. Sorry that you're in front of us. You probably think it's ridiculous that you're in front of us. Their biggest gripe was the way that we rolled this out. So they didn't like the fact that we did this grand announcement. They thought that I should have had a lot more community input before making the decision, and I didn't do that. And that's probably a lesson learned on my part. We thought we were going to announce this thing, and I will be honest with you, never in my life did I think a 5-mile-an-hour Jeep event in a quarry site was going to cause the outcry that it did. But the good news and the silver lining is we really see the passion of our citizens to really, at some point in time when we are done mining that site, to turn it into a park. And that's really actually the direction that we have started to go in trying to figure out what exactly does that look like. Our contract with Brad Hoffman was a valid contract, and I was not willing to get into a legal battle ending this. We had signed an MOU. There's a sunset on it. It sunsets in September. So at the most, he might do one other event. And I think when they realized, okay, we now see that this was a successful event. It didn't affect our community. They sort of have changed their narrative to, we didn't really have an issue with the event. We just really want it to be a park. And so that's kind of the direction that we're looking at from the county level, as to how and when we'll be able to do such a task.
And what about all those people who did sign this petition, that the homeowners and so on that said, hey, we have reservations before the event?
Right.
Any sense about what their sentiment is like now after post-event?
So, like I said, the petition it was kind of interesting to stop the event, but then the HOA president went on the record stating, well, it wasn't about stopping the event. It was about that we really want the park, and we don't want this to take the place. Like, we don't want it to turn into only an off-road place. We just want to make sure that it's still in the pipeline to be a park. The online petition, if the council is going to go with online petitions, then look at the poll in Eastern Shore Undercover, because 1,500 people said keep the executive and 100 said don't. So if we're going to go with online polls, then you know what I mean? And here's the thing. I have no idea how valid that poll was on either side. I was getting emails from people in Alaska saying save the park. And it was and I have to keep reiterating this, Conley Mill is not a park. It's not a park. It is literally a quarry work site that has the potential to one day potentially be a park. But we were getting letters from people in Baltimore, Alaska, like I said, Hawaii. There was people from all over. And I'm glad that they did that reach out. But it's like, okay, well, we're literally talking about one community here. So
You have a broad stroke here. Is it?
Yeah. Apparently my reach is all the way to Alaska and Hawaii.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, right.
So I also want to ask you about your relationship with the mayor of Salisbury, Randy Taylor. Now, obviously, he opposed it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I get sense it's frosty. I'm not sure that's quite the right word I would use. But
no.
What sense do you get about what's going on here?
So what's funny is that we got that letter from Randy's from the city attorney asking them to remove themselves due to a zoning issue. We are exempt from zoning. I tried to explain this to Randy, and when we sat him down with Paul Wilbur, our county attorney, we said, you do know that Henry S. Parker is zoned as conservation. It's not really made for ball fields, but the reason we were able to do the ball fields is because we're exempt from the zoning. The Civic Center is zoned residential, but you don't tell us what events we can have there. I said, that's why we're exempt. And if you look on SStat, before we acquired the Conley Mill property, it was listed as residential. Post-acquisition, it's listed as exempt. So it's an exempt property. Once we sat down and explained that to him, he kind of understood. And the thing is that Randy said, what's happening after this MOU is up? And I said, we probably are not going to renew the MOU. And the council is looking to pass legislation for outdoor motor events anyway. So I said, we probably wouldn't be able, to do that anyway. As far as Randy and I get along great. Okay. We really do. We really do. There was a little bit of a mishap. And I told him, I brought him in and I said, we need to be good governing partners. I said, and him and I have a lot in common, when it comes, politically and things like that. But even so, I said, I want to support the city of Salisbury. That hasn't happened in the past. There's been a lot of tension between the county and the city, and we are really trying to work together. Andy Kitzrow and I have a great working relationship, and Randy and I have a great working relationship, but there are going to be things that we disagree on, and this just happened to be one. But once he sat down and really heard our side, I think he realized how it was a little bit reactive to send that without really sitting down and having that conversation. And I just told him, I said, if there's something I'm doing that you have an issue with, let's sit down and have that conversation.
By the way, this is slightly outside your bailiwick, but we have all this controversy about downtown development. Mm-hmm. It's not in the county, it's in the city. Mm-hmm. But what's your sense about where that's going?
So here's my thought. I understand the new mayor's frustration with this whole, and he uses this line all the time that the dollar store is closed. We're not, selling off parking lots for $1 anymore. But I also know, and I do have to say this, when I was running, I sat with Randy Day before he left Purdue.
Jake Day, rather.
No, Randy. No, Randy at Purdue.
Okay.
Yes, yeah,
okay.
yeah. I've sat down with Jake too, but I sat down with Randy, Randy really made such a great point, and this is what he told me. He said, I have to have agriculture, or else my business would not work, with everything that we do with Purdue. But we also have a hard time getting people here because they want to have a city to visit. They want to have that. So there is a happy medium between having that, rural lifestyle, but also having the city. So this is my thought. The downtown, vision, whatever that is, whether what mayor is in there, I'm going to support whatever they decide because the city of Salisbury is the city of Salisbury. I'm actually probably one of those, I don't know why it's faux pas for Republicans to not like development, but I do like development. In the right areas. I'm not about urban sprawl. I don't want to see big, tall buildings in Parsonsburg and things like that, but we do have to have, I'm about to develop. I brought a developer here. I brought a new developer here. I brought Ed St. John here to develop flex space because we don't have it, and it's in the right areas. And I think that that's what's so important.
So finally, looking at this issue, we could have very well a vote that would eliminate your position.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it ends, I think, with 2026, I think it is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what happens after that if indeed they eliminate it for you? And the big question is, given that we have this lawsuit that wants to eliminate the at-large positions as well, you going to run for any of those jobs?
I might. I've actually thought about it. Well, I thought I was in a different, depending on what that map is going to look like,
Right.
I think I would end up running against James Wynn. And we're in the same district, so I don't know how that would work. But in all honesty, I probably would, but I would go back. This is how my life would be affected. I literally would go back to teaching. I've taught for 17 years. There are things that I miss in the classroom, but I'll be honest with you. This position is worth fighting for. Whether you agree with me politically or you like the job that I've done or you don't like the job that I've done, vote me out in 26. I'm really frustrated that the council feels that they are giving the power back to the people to make this vote. But if it does go through, then you're stripping the power away from the people to have an elected official. If people are unhappy with me, they'll vote me out in 26. And I feel like this is a very sneaky way of getting it on the ballot in hopes that people won't read the ballot initiatives. And look, I worked so hard to get in this seat. I worked really hard. Nobody knew who I was. And I only beat, John Pasota by 279 votes. And I worked so hard at getting around this county. If they don't think that I will not work hard to go against this ballot initiative, then they have seriously underestimated me. But this position is worth fighting for. We deserve to have an executive here. We deserve to have that representation in Annapolis and in D.C. And I would really hope that people see that. And like I said, if they're unhappy, then that's the democratic process. Then they vote me out, and then there's a new executive starting in 26. But let's say it does go through. This is what's going to happen. We are still going to work hard for the 2 years. We are going to try to figure out, I just don't even know what this looks like because you just don't know who the council is going to be, who the administrator is going to be, but we're going to try to set them up as best as we can because we're not going to let the county fail. We can't, I was given, I know how that feels like. I was given a 20-minute transition handed a county. And so I will never do that to anybody else. So regardless, we will work hard for the 2.5 years and try to prep whoever or however this is going to look as best we can, as we leave.
We've been speaking with the Wicomico County Executive, Julie Giordano. We appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us, and no doubt we'll be talking about this again.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.